I decided to continue chronologically, to the best of my memory. So next place I went to was South New Jersey. After leaving Virginia, I drove up and through Maryland, went through Delaware and Pennsylvania on the interstate before exiting and heading toward the turnpike and exiting right before going to Florence, New Jersey. I stopped in Burlington and paid for a motel. I paid for the week. While receiving the key to my room, a man entered the motel with 3 deep gashes going across his torso, from his left shoulder down to his right hip. I stopped and headed toward him and asked what happened. The only words he got out was, "Jersey Devil," before collapsing. I hollered at the cashier to call 911 as I tore his shirt off and tied the scraps together and used it to wrap around the wound and create pressure to slow the bleeding. After the ambulance arrived and the cops took our statements, I asked about this Jersey Devil. One of the medics, EMT, whatever they're called, gulped and grabbed my arm. She pulled me to the side and explained Jersey Devil is one of the Lead family. A band of misfits where Mother Lead prayed her last child would be a devil. 9 months later, she gave birth to her last child. The boy was born with blue eyes and blonde hair. Right after birthing, his eyes turned red and hair like coarse coal. His skin became akin to the leather, his wings sprouted from his back, and his nose and mouth became a snout. His feet turned to hooves and hands grew clawed. As if on cue, when transformation completed, he killed his mother and flew off. That shit was fucking horrifying. Once the EMT finished her story, they were ready to leave, so she hopped in the back of the ambulance and left. I headed to my room just down the hall and rested for the night. I knew the next day was going to be a long one. When I awoke, I was already day. I searched on Google Maps for the nearest Roman Catholic church. It was in Moorestown. Man, technology has come so far. I remember when flip phones were considered revolutionary. Anyways, when I arrived, I walked in and sat on a pew. A few minutes later, a priest came up to me and asked, "How are you doing, my son? Have you come to praise our Lord God?" I simply responded, "Father, forgive me, but I have not. I came for you." As I rose to meet him, he caught a whiff of something and said under his breath, "You smell death." I froze for a moment. Shaking, I fearfully thought, what does he mean? As I stood, I asked if he has heard of the Jersey Devil. He took a step back. I explained, "I'm trying to kill it. I need to know anything I can. Any weaknesses, anything I can, just say, to scare it. Anything helps, Father." The priest finally said, "My name is John. It seems you're similar to our exorcist. Give me a moment." Father John stepped off behind the altar. He came back with a vial of holy water and a paper with 2 numbers written on it, in his office number, and a number to an exorcist he trusts. From there, I left. I added the numbers into my phone. Father John and Chris. I went to the nearest firearms store. What a surprise, this state sucks when it comes to them. No buying guns without a Jersey gun license. Same goes for ammo. So, to Philly I went. An hour drive and I arrived and bought a bag of 380 ACP hollow point. I drove back to my motel room, spotting a bar about a block away from my motel. I arrived at the hotel and threw my Glock 42 and ankle holster into a backpack. I also tossed in my ammo and a drill, and I carried a vial of holy water Father John had procured me into my room. I drilled into the hollow points and dipped the holy water into it. Before crimping the bullets down with pliers on my multi-tool, I tested the bullets by holding them upside down. Nothing dripped out. I then repeated that 11 more times, before loading 2 mags and holstering my weapon. By the time I finished everything, it was a little after 5 p.m. The day had been long and stressful, so I went to the bar. I didn't drive since it was close, so I went by foot. When I walked in, I ordered a beer, Guinness to be exact. As I began to drink, a man came stumbling into the bar, and immediately the bartender yelled at him, "Get out. You know you're banned." The man stumbled forward and threw a haymaker at the bartender. It was slow and telegraphed, so I stepped in and threw him down. I kept hold of his arm and dragged him outside. Never did I expect to see a sigil tattooed on his wrist like that. It looked like something from the Greater and Lesser Keys of Solomon. So I stopped, shook that I'd see anything from that book again. He stood up and hit me dead on the chin. I went down like a hot sack of potatoes when I hit the ground. I looked forward, just to see a car with a skeleton, wearing a black cloak. As I stood up, I grabbed the rock and turned towards him, throwing a right hook and connecting, hearing a solid crack sound come from my finger. I broke it again. The man didn't go down. I kicked his inner thigh and threw a straight connecting to his jaw once again. This time, I knocked him out. I went back in and paid my tab, and then stepped back outside and waited for a man to wake up. When he did, I was there. Pistol in hand, I had some questions, and I was going to get some answers. The way he stumbled, it looked like he was a below-the-knee amputee. But that tattoo, I was just too interested. About 10 minutes later, he arose. Jokes aside, he woke up and I asked my questions. Was with the tattoo on the arm. The man simply responded, "I'm a pagan, but that thing is terrifying, and I needed something to keep it away." "What thing?" I responded. He then said, "The thing that took my leg." I simply said afterward, "What thing?" Again, a moment of silence occurred before he said, "The Jersey Devil." So I told him, "Follow me and tell me of any way to trap this thing. In return, I won't call the cops." And he did. Well, in my room, he taught me a simple little trap, a devil's trap, if you will. He claims the Jersey Devil is just a possessed child. Lucky for me, I can test this theory. I sent him off and thanked him. I gave him the last bit of my whiskey as payment. I then attempted to sleep, but it was hard. I couldn't stop thinking about that man's tattoo and what happened to his leg. I don't know when I nodded off, but I came to in a forest eye-to-eye, whole, with the skeleton in the cloak. He spoke in gargles, gags, pops, and cracks, yet I understood him. Terrifying as it was, it almost soothing the way he spoke. What he said in English, "Keep on killing. I'm quite interested in you. A man who survived hanging." From that, I awoke. I had been asleep for over a day. I went driving for the rest of the day and found the area in the forest where I had been in my dream. I knew this is where I needed to trap him. I called the exorcist that Father John had told me about. He came to me in my motel room and knocked 7 times, waited a bit, and knocked 7 times more. Waited a bit, and it knocked 7 more times. By that point, I had gone up and to the door and opened it. There was Father Chris. I let him in, and we developed a plan. It was easy to tell that he was not a big fan of me, but he believes that the plan was devised would work. He contacted all the exorcists in the area, and I contacted Father John, who contacted all other priests to notify me if they hear or see anything. However, it was unexpected how quickly we got a response. The next morning, we were notified by Father Jamie that he had been tracking the thing, so off me and Chris went. Chris was spray painting the sigil into the grass of the forest as I went to where the Jersey Devil had been tracked to. When I arrived to where the thing was, I hopped out of my car and ran to it. I could hear its loud breathing. I threw a bit of holy water and the thing screeched something awful. The beast jumped into action and began chasing me. Each time it got close, I fired a round of holy water into the thing. Honestly, it worked way better than expected. The beast followed me, but each shot at it would slow it down just enough for me to get a lead. When I arrived at my car, I threw more holy water onto the roof before hopping in. I was speeding over to Chris when the cops followed. Shit, I was going to get busted for speeding. Or was I? The beast ran through the 2 cars. I stopped and fired 2 shots at the thing, and it looked at me. Those demonic eyes stared straight into my soul. Intense, burning fury is all I could feel. The devil continued running towards me, and I got back to driving. The thing shattered my windows with an ear-bleeding screech. I turned around and scared, like I had never been in my years of living so far, and fired 2 shots at the thing. I couldn't hear them as I neared. I called Father Chris and yelled, "I can't hear right now, set off the flare if you're ready." Sure enough, he was. When I hopped out of my car, I dropped to the ground. Without adrenaline, I knew I wouldn't have gotten up. It really is a wonder drug. Anyways, I stumbled to my feet and continued to run as I was. I yelled to Chris that I was stumbling. He came to my side and helped me. Each time the thing got close, I fired 2 shots. I was stumbling too much and fell. I thought I was done for. I damn near pissed myself, and Chris wrapped his arms from my backside around my chest and began dragging me like a soldier would drag a casualty. We arrived at the spot, and I fired 1 last shot at the thing. Chris dropped me in a sigil as the devil came towards us. I rolled forward as Chris pushed it. The thing fell over me and into the sigil. I then continued to roll out of the sigil, and Chris helped me to my feet. I was passing out. Before I was unconscious, I handed Chris my Glock and told him about the bullets. When I awoke, I was in the church I'd been in a few days before. I could hear again, and I was cleaned up. However, my car was still a mess, and the key to my room was missing. I slipped out of the room and found Father John. He told me church was about to start, and the least I could do was stay for Mass. So I did. Oh God, I hated it. As I left, I could hear a skeleton speak to me again. He told me, "Continue on." It sent shivers down my spine. It turns out my key had been returned to the motel. I swapped out the glass of my car and took it to a repair shop. I was sitting in a park as I waited for my car to be fixed. Father Chris and Jamie came up to me and offered me a room in the church. I got Jamie's number and left when my car was ready. Before leaving town, I picked up some holy oil from Father John and went to the Beast. I dumped a bunch of it onto the Beast. I lit up my cigarette with my Zippo and threw it onto the Beast. As it screeched, I jumped into my car, called the fire department, and drove off. Once I could no longer hear the Beast, I removed my earplugs just to hear its screeches die out. I knew the thing was dead. On my way to Niagara Falls, I got a call. It was Agent Seward, the one who offered me my job. He praised me for killing the Beast and wanted me to stay low. They're removing my warrants from the database and clearing my records from the public. So, I'll be living out of my car for a bit.